From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the JR at the end of the name. It's very important to remember the Junior. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And if you are watching us on the Gulf Coast Sports Entertainment Network, hello again. Great to be with you. Glad you have found us here on this network. All right, Andre, today is Monday. Not a good Monday after what everyone witnessed on Sunday, following a great Saturday, I must say. But for the purposes of this podcast, we're sticking with the Saints. Ugly. But before we get into that, how are you feeling?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good, and it's a strange Monday. You know, typically when we get into Monday, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air, and we've got a little time before we get into the next week, but there's no time getting into the next week for us or the Saints because you know who's coming into the Dome on Thursday night. Sean Payton, Denver Broncos, so it's a short week for everybody.
Yes, it is, and we're going to get into that matchup and the circumstances with him a little bit today, but mostly we're going to stick with the Saints in their current sort of state of being now. Yeah. It's not good. So what are we doing with the big picture today?
Big picture today, the Saints on a 4-game losing streak after that electric 2-0 start, now sitting at 2-4 on the season. Sean, what is the state of this team? How are you feeling about the black and gold after this losing streak?
Okay, look, I as you guys know, love me or hate me, I'm with this team all the time. Like I'm with them. There's about 8 or 9 of us that we live our lives are based on the schedule. So it's not just about the game. It's about kind of the vibe that I feel when I watch a team and just body language. And, you know, a lot of that comes from the way they play on the field. So this is where I feel like I'm kind of just, more than most, I'm around them. So this is kind of how I feel about it. So take that information for what you want. But the state of the Saints is this. It ain't good. After a promising 2-0 start, this team is reeling bad. 4 straight losses culminating in an absolute embarrassment. It's an absolute embarrassment Sunday to a division rival, 51-27, where the Bucs nearly rolled up 600 total yards in a game when you had 3 interceptions on defense. It just doesn't make sense to me. Let me just say. Been around Dennis Allen a long time. He's been here a long time. I've been around a long time. The look in his eye right now is different. He knew how bad that loss looked. And it wasn't a, hey, we got to do better, guys. We got to figure it out. We got to execute. It was a, oh, shoot, and I'm putting shoot in place of a curse word there. If we don't turn this thing around fast, I could be unemployed, look.
Yeah.
Called it atrocious. That's true. He said it has to get better. That's true. He said it starts with me. Again, true. He always says he doesn't pay attention to the outside noise. But what if the noise is getting louder in the building? 4 straight losses will do that to you. I look at this team and I see a defense that either quit or is so undisciplined that they can't make plays. Either way, it doesn't look good on the head coach, who was also the defensive coordinator, who's calling the defensive plays, who all of a sudden seems to have lost his magic, lost his mojo when it comes to calling plays over the last couple of weeks. Then I see a multitude of injuries. 17 players on the injured list today. It was an estimated injury report. That's what happens on a Thursday. You probably understand this by now. 17 players is still 17 players. I believe there were 6 that technically did not practice. The injuries are piling up. Ain't no such. The next man up is the biggest myth in all of sports. We've talked about that. Then I see age. 8 core players / starters over the age of 30 this team is counting on right now. Let's just add it up. Lucas Patrick, injured. Derek Carr, injured. Taysom Hill, injured. Tyrann Mathieu, injured in the game. Demario Davis, technically not injured, but looks a step or maybe two slow right now. Either that's age or he ain't right from that hamstring injury, the first real injury he suffered throughout his career. Cam Jordan, hey, nice interception yesterday, but clearly he's getting phased out. He's in the twilight of his career, his last days as a Saint. Nathan Shepard, is he even a factor? I know he had a nice play yesterday against the run, But come on, he's not a difference maker. But as he playing up front as a run stuffer, a defensive tackle, and a run stuffing defense, that's just been laughable recently. And it's not all bad luck. It's part, I've said this so many times, it's part of the risk you run when so many of your core guys are getting up in age. Injuries and ineffectiveness or diminishing skills become a part of the package. So you can't play that card when you've kind of driven down this path. That's what brings me to my next point. The issue is bigger than one man. I know right now everyone is on the DA, fire DA train there. I understand that. And frankly, let me find here. Yeah. And frankly, I don't blame you. You're the paying customer. If that's the way you feel, you have a right to express that opinion. And look, after missing the playoffs the last couple seasons, and you're 2-4 right now after that start, if that's the way you feel, other coaches have got it fired for less.
Yeah.
For less, grievances. But understand this. If this thing really comes undone and the issues, if it really comes undone, I'm talking unravels, the issues are bigger than just DA. They're foundational, they're organizational, they're institutional. If the bottom falls out, the change, big if, not there yet, but big if, the change would have to be more than just DA. It would have to be, frankly, higher up the food chain, in my opinion, if it got to that point. That's where we're at in the state of the Saints, the state of this organization. When you look at the winding road this has taken, they have maximized this type of approach as long as they possibly can. And that approach, frankly, started with the impulsive guy that's going to be here on Thursday night, visiting New Orleans inside the Superdome. Of course, he skipped town when it was time to clean up the mess. Different story, different day, but you can only play that card for so long. The organization has decided to continue that approach. And like I said, despite there's been some moments of positivity, it hasn't really been the crater that you need to pull the plug, and it's led to 3 years of mediocrity, and who knows how this year is going to be. So what's the current state of the Saints? Let's just pray they get healthy and get a few more wins, because a lot of jobs could be and should be riding on it. That's where we're at with the New Orleans Saints right now.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, this is not something that just happened this year. This has been a slow build over the last few years, slow build of frustration, I'm sure, amongst the front office and also amongst the fan base. It's been a long time since a lot of Saints fans have been to a playoff game in the Superdome. It's been a long time. And then you look at the game on Sunday, there was a lot of, and we talked about it here on the podcast, there was a lot of excitement coming into Sunday's game, getting to see Spencer Rattler, who we will get to later in this podcast. We're going to grade his performance, but really just this entire season, after the 2-0 start, I mean, the Saints were like the national darling for a day or two. They were getting talked about on every major network as a Super Bowl dark horse, and all of a sudden they fall into 2-4. All of a sudden the defense that we thought was going to be the strength of this team is last in total defense, 32nd in total defense in the NFL. That's in yards per game. And not only are they failing in making basic tackles, football fundamentals, as DA called it, they're failing in situational moments. Late in the game against Philadelphia, the offense, which struggled for most of the game, they scored. Defense gives up a long pass to Dallas Goedert and eventually a touchdown to Saquon Barkley. The pass interference against Atlanta that wound up being the reason that Young Wei Koo kicks a game-winning field goal. Not being able to tackle Patrick Mahomes and hold down an injured Chiefs team. And then everything that happened yesterday, and particularly in the second half, it's just the defense has not been the top 10 defense that you expected them to be this year. And I remember after week 2, I had Waffle House for breakfast, and then I came in and ate my words for lunch because I said the Saints would start 1-5. Right now they sit at 2-4, and everything that I thought, or many of the things I thought would be an issue for them, is coming back to bite them, and that's the lack of depth across their offense, particularly on the offensive line, which we're seeing, and we've seen so many different units and so many different guys plugged and played in that offensive line to the point where you can say next man up until your voice cracks. And then you also look at the other positions. Derek Carr gets hurt. Spencer Rattler comes in, and Spencer Rattler wasn't, obviously he's a rookie, but it's not like you've got an NFL veteran like Jameis Winston, who you may have had last year, coming in. somebody like Taysom, who has a good record as a starting quarterback coming in. Teddy Bridgewater, who once upon a time came in as the backup quarterback and what was it, won 5 games?
Yeah, 5-0.
Yeah, 5-0 as a starter. You look at running back, Alvin Kamara, who's pushing the age of 30, is having to take way too many carries and way too many touches because behind him is Jamal Williams, who's been ineffective, and Kendre Miller, who can't get back on the football field. You look at wide receiver. Now Chris Olave's gone down. I had people texting me yesterday, who's Bud Means? Because not everybody knows the guy who the Saints picked late in the draft, the rookie this year. So it's a lack of depth all across the roster. And moving forward, if this team can't get healthy, you may see a lot more of the same disappointments that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, and we're normally not the gloom and doom types. I mean, we're normally not. I mean, but I see, like, the only hope is for them to get healthy. And when you have older players that you're counting on, not just older players that complement the roster, older players that you're counting on that are core pieces, all being out or all have showed clear signs of diminishing skills, that's a problem. And what you need, somebody in their early 20s has got to step up. And I mean, Olave certainly had his moments, but he exited early with a concussion. Shaheed has certainly had his moments. He was on the injury report today.
He was.
I don't know what happened. They said it was quote unquote concerning. We'll see in one report. Who's the young star on this team right now? I mean, they've been begging for Kendre Miller to be ready. Maybe he comes back this year. Alante's certainly done pretty well. They've had some good moments in the secondary. But that's my point. As you go down this path and you get older and older and older with all these contract reworks, the young, fresh blood's got to come through and kind of emerge. And some have. I mean, Pete Werner's done pretty good. Look, up until this year, I thought Paulson Adebo has been a solid guy, and Alante Taylor. There's been some, but not nearly as many to offset what has clearly become an aging roster. And like I said, you cannot separate age from injury, age from ineffectiveness. It all goes hand in hand. And that's why you're in a heck of a spot right now, because it's not there's nowhere to turn when you get like that. It's like we just got to roll with the guys we got, and there's no real, I hate to say reason for optimism. Like the only reason for optimism is get Taysom Hill back or is to get Eric McCoy back, because that's the only way they're going to manage this, and the schedule softens up a little bit over the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be an interesting set of circumstances, because look, let me just clearly and definitively state, I don't think they're firing Dennis Allen in the season unless it gets really, really bad. Would 2-5 qualify for that? Probably not. But I could see something like him maybe having to give up defensive play calling or something of that nature. If it got to like 2-8, 2-9, then you're having a discussion. But then if it got to that point, that should only be step one in that process. But it's a little far down the road. As for right now, state of the Saints, it ain't good. The vibes ain't good. And a short week against the Denver Broncos is going to be interesting how they handle it this week.
The vibes ain't good, but the vibes were good for about 10 or 15 minutes at the start of that game in the Superdome when Spencer Rattler ran out, the rookie quarterback making his first start. He probably got one of the loudest ovations that I've heard in the Dome all season. He goes out, 22 for 40 passing, 243 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, a 27.7 QBR. That's quarterback rating, 1 to 100. He scored a 27.7. He also had 4 carries for 27 yards. Sean, give us the Rattler report. What would you grade young Spencer in his first game?
All right. Well, be warned, guys, because I'm coming. I'm coming with some objective truths here. It might hurt some of y'all's feelings. You may like it. You may be surprised. I don't know. Okay. Spencer Rattler. Okay. What I loved, frankly, was his body language. He wasn't nervous. He looked poised. He didn't look like early on. He didn't look like a rookie making his first start. I couldn't tell you how many times we were just kind of chatting in the press box. I was like, you never noticed it was a rookie right here making his first start. He looks comfortable. He looks like he belongs. Looks like when he's going with the ball, he didn't look nervous in any sort of way. Second quarter, things got rolling. There were times, this I'm sure you too, this phone started blowing up with friends. Group texts were blowing me up saying, thanking Derek Carr for his services, but they will no longer be needed. I'm sure a lot of y'all were thinking that in the second quarter, and I'm sure social media was buzzing with that. He was very, very comfortable on the bootleg rollout play, which is obviously a staple of this offense. From the offense's first play, He hit Juwan Johnson. You could just tell he was settling in. He had a few really nice connections on the bootleg. Not as quite as proficient in the pocket in particular when he had to come off his first read, but still decent enough in that regard. Defense, and he got caught a couple breaks in the second quarter, and sometimes that happens when you got that good mojo. Defense had 3 picks. Special teams, we talked about a non-offensive touchdown, gave him a punt return for a touchdown, set up some early points on some short fields. And then, but at that point, you felt pretty good. It was 27-24. He was 11-17, 140 with a tutty. Felt pretty good about that second half. And then the second half happened, and frankly, he looked like a rookie all over again. It was almost like you would expect the inverse would have happened. Like you start a little shaky, and then you kind of find your way. But in this case, it was the opposite. Once the bootleg, Todd Bowles, was a very good. It was pretty clear what he was doing early on. It was pretty clear to see where Spencer Rattler was comfortable early on. And once Bowles took that away and he started throwing all the exotic blitzes where you pressure from one side, you drop another guy out, and you rotate the safeties, and there's a lot of things you have to decipher. He didn't have an answer. And that's a young rookie making his first start. He's not going to really have an answer to that because I guarantee you he has never seen anything like that at the collegiate level. That proficient and that efficient and that just well done. It was like a well-oiled machine. I'm surprised more defenses don't do that, but it's got to be pretty exact when you do that. But Rattler never really had a run game, which was something we discussed in our last pod because I think the Saints knew they may not have a run game, and that's why they went to Spencer Rattler in addition to him being perhaps the better playmaker, better player than Jake Haener. All in all, you saw why, A, they like him. He's got some chills, got some tools, got some physical traits, but also B, and I don't know why this is so controversial for y'all, he's not there yet. He's not there yet. Nor was he drafted to be there yet in his rookie year. I know some of y'all wanted a quarterback controversy, but I just don't think this is happening. Let me restate for those of y'all, man, I saw a few of the comments. Losing respect for me because I refuse to go all in on your Rattler is the savior stuff before his first career start. I don't know what to tell you. My opinion comes from watching everything. I guarantee you, I don't know if you think I know more than you, but I have watched more Spencer Rattler than you when it comes to being in the Saints uniform from all the practices, the preseason games, training camp, mini camp, all that stuff. That's what I saw in camp and preseason. And if you really average out his first start, that's kind of the way it played out. His first career game. Sorry if that offended you, but there are definitely some traits where he could potentially be something down the road, and I mean that sincerely. I love his arm. I love his poise. I love his moxie. I love certain things they ask him to do. I love his mobility. I love how comfortable he looks in that bootleg game. But there's some things he's got to work on. He's not there yet. That's fine. That's what a 5th round quarterback. That's what you're drafting for. You're not necessarily drafting a savior, regardless of what y'all think. But he could potentially get there someday. So overall, my grade, I gave him a C+. Not bad. Not great. Definitely did enough to earn another start, if that's worth anything, with Carr being out. But when Carr returns, he's the guy. Like, I know that hurts some of y'all's feelings, but Carr comes back, he's the guy. Unless it's a longer period of time. Let's say it's like a 6-week stretch, and Rattler goes, it's clear he's got the hot hand, and he goes on a tear for like four straight games or something. Then maybe we can have that discussion. But for right now, he's a solid backup. I think he's squarely the number 2 now. Had a decent debut. But that's where I leave it. What do you,
right.
What do you think?
I'm not going to project this season. I'm going to speak on this one game, and I'm going to give him a C- if I had to grade him. And I'm going to say, by the way, that C- is me giving him some grace. Because the way a lot of Saints fans feel and act, if you take Spencer Rattler out that game and plug in Derek Carr, and it's the same situation, the same numbers, 22 for 40, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 243 yards in 40 pass attempts, if he gets multiple interceptions that put him in scoring range, a punt return for a touchdown, and still goes out there and puts a goose egg up in the second half, still goes out there and makes some of the bad throws that he made, some of the inaccuracies, some of the underthrows that he made, people would be giving Derek Carr a D, maybe even an F.
Right.
For that same game, I'm going to give Spencer Rattler some grace because he was a rookie making his first start. He didn't have much of a run game. The offensive line is banged up, so I'm going to give him a C-. They say C's get degrees. Don't listen to me, kids. Make that honor roll. But they say C's get degrees. I'm going to give Spencer Rattler a C- for being barely passable because you got to take into account, especially watching that second half, there were so many times where he would spin out and try to get going, and you kind of see the Saints were really putting an emphasis on the play action game, getting him out the pocket, rolling out, letting him use that mobility early in the game to get him comfortable and build up that confidence. But it felt like that confidence started to wane as the game went on. And late in that fourth quarter and in the third quarter, he started just kind of scrambling out when nobody was there. He would see a blitz. The blitz would actually get picked up pretty well.
Backspin out.
But by then, he's backspun. He's looking out. He's throwing the ball away. He underthrew a deep shot to Rashid Shaheed for an interception. And if you really watch, he had Rashid Shaheed deep. The deep balls that Derek Carr had been completing all throughout the season, he had about 2 or 3 of those throughout the course of the game, and he just missed it. You know, the speed that he's making his reads, going from one read to the next, he's still got some work to do there. And like you mentioned, that's to be expected. Spencer Rattler was not picked first overall.
Right.
Spencer Rattler was not a
I got to
first-round
remind
pick.
Saints fans of that sometimes.
Yeah,
It's like,
you know, Caleb Williams was brought in to change life in Chicago. Drake May was brought in to change life in New England. Jaden Daniels brought in to change life in Washington, D.C. The Saints did not draft Spencer Rattler to change life in New Orleans. The Saints drafted Spencer Rattler to maybe one day become a quality quarterback, to be a consistent backup, to do what he's doing now, to back up Derek Carr if he could take the job from Jake Haener, which it seems like he has, and again, to learn. Since 1970, 1.3% of quarterbacks drafted in the first round or later made an all-pro team. 9% have made a Pro Bowl. It's 230 quarterbacks, 21 have made a Pro Bowl. That's not what you're drafting a quarterback there for. And yesterday we saw why he was the 7th quarterback off the board in the draft in April. We saw why he fell to pick 150, because he's not there yet, and that's okay. The Saints didn't draft him to be there yet. The Saints didn't, just like Drake May came in and they benched Jacoby Brissett in New England so that Drake May could come in and throw 3 touchdowns. That's what he was drafted to do. Not what Spencer Rattler was picked to do. What he was picked to do is to sit behind Derek Carr, to learn, and if his number was ever called, to be ready. He took a good step forward on Sunday. He learned some things. He did some things well, showed some mobility that we haven't seen in a black and gold uniform outside of Taysom Hill in a long time. But there are still a lot of things to work on. I look forward to seeing him be better on Thursday.
That's it. It was a good first step, but it was a first step. And, you know, defining his ceiling is a little hard because he has such physical tools, but there is a level of consistency that I don't think he ever quite touched in college that partly was not his fault, that I think that needs to – the only way you're going to ever know is if he continues to play.
Right.
And he'll probably get one more opportunity, at least, maybe 2. And I think he should play better and have better stats and maybe have a little bit better feel for the speed of the game. But there were a couple things. You know, when I go back and watch tape of a game and I'm evaluating a quarterback and I talk about the misses, I'm not talking about where you make a throw and you just and you miss, it's inaccurate, or the guy tips it, or whatever the case. I'm talking about where you run a play and you just don't see an open man, and it could result in a big play. I normally give a quarterback 1, maybe 2 of those a game, because in the NFL you just can't make those misses. For Spencer, a rookie, I'll give him 3, and I counted 5. There was the big throw to Holker that he missed. There was an early kind of a deep 7 route to Rashid Shaheed that he missed. That still resulted in completion. There was an over-the-middle drag route to Shaheed that he missed. There was a wheel route that Kamara got matched up on a DN that he missed, and there was another play it escapes me for 1 second. So to me, that was overall okay. That you've got to get better there from a field vision standpoint. And then I've always said when it came to Spencer Rattler, it's not it's like he knows where to go with the ball most of the time. It's just an issue of timing. That second interception was the perfect example of that, because that's a cover 3 zone, that nickel corner or that safety, whoever he was, he's releasing all the way to the flat, and he just thinks he's got more time than he does. And that guy closed the gap so quickly and undercut that with ease. It was kind of a weak throw. His mechanics were bad, but the ball was picked off. But at the same time, he had a nice throw on that bootleg drive to Juwan Johnson. I love the touchdown play where he kind of pumps the fake and hits the 7 route to Bub Means. I thought Bub Means did a really good job in this game, and I think he should probably get some love for wide receiver 3. But we'll see with all these receivers out today and over the next couple of days. We'll see. But why can't we just leave it at that with Spencer Rattler? A nice start, but I mean, I think we're both in agreement. When Carr comes back, Carr will be the guy. And then maybe after this year or maybe later this year, whatever the case may be, if they got to turn back to him, wish him that maybe something good can happen. But right now, this is where he's at.
I agree. And one thing you mentioned is Bub Means. I think Bub Means needs to get a lot more run because you need to consider the fact that since July, when Spencer Rattler has really been, training camp, mini camp, all of that, he wasn't taking the majority of his reps with the ones.
Right.
He was taking the majority of his reps with the Bub Meanses of the world, with the Stanley Morgans, who was no longer here, the Equanimous St. Browns. The guys like that, the A.T. Perry's, who's going to be coming back. He's in Denver right now. So A.T. Perry's making his trip back to New Orleans sooner than expected. But maybe a little bit with Cedric Wilson. So having Dallin Holker in there, having Bub Means in there, having Cedric Wilson in there, ironically, he probably has more chemistry with those guys than he does the Chris Olaves and Rashid Shaheeds of the world.
Yeah, and losing Olave early certainly hurt. But again, the play before that, he fumbles a snap. They're running a bubble screen. So instead of even they get 2 or 3 yards on that play, you're looking at 2nd and 6 or 7 as opposed to 2nd and 15, and maybe you're not running that play on that situation or in that situation. So that's where I'm at with it. I think it was a good overall positive. Like I said, C+ is not in my view. You gave him C-, I gave him C+.
You get degrees, you get that in school, you'll make it out.
That's where it's at. I mean, look, he wasn't the reason they lost, but he certainly didn't help his team win, or at least I don't know how you want to phrase it, but you get what I mean. So. We'll see. But look, there's a strong chance he gets the start again on Thursday, and that will be another opportunity for him. Anything else before we get out of here?
Quick yes or no question for you, and we can expand later in the week. Do you think Sean Payton gets cheered or booed when he comes back on Thursday?
I think it's going to be booing. I really do. I think it's going to be booing. So
I think I'm curious to see if the Saints give him some kind of video tribute or anything like that.
Get him off his game a little bit. I could see that.
Yeah, I'd like to think there's going to be cheers. I think he deserves it, but I know a lot of Saints fans are still a little angry for how he did his team, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's a mess here in New Orleans, and he kind of played a part in that as well. So, all right, so we're going to get up out of here for Andre Johnson Jr. I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.